Grognards of gaming, and I am with you as always, Rob the Grognard Dog, and with me is my fellow Grognard,
Miracle Mike.
and
JB.
and with us tonight is a very special guest, Father Aaron, the Dungeon Minister. Now,
Hello.
Now, we promised our audience at the end of the last Grognard session that we were going to do an episode on props and ambiance, but that we have the rare honor of having Father Aaron here tonight. So we're going to talk about the topic that really has kind of made Father Aaron the internet sensation that he is, running role-playing games for younger players. And of course, if you want to come back, Father Aaron, for a future episode on props or whatever, you're always welcome to do that. But today we're gonna focus entirely on you, and we want to hear your story. So if anyone out there has not yet seen the Dungeon Minister YouTube channel with Father Aaron, shut this off now. Go watch all of them, and then come back and you can watch Grognards. It's really great. And so when you started recording your Dungeon Minister YouTube channel back in the summer of 2021, Father, your sons for whom you run this game, your Beck Me Dungeons and Dragons game, they were 11, 9, and 6. Is that right?
Let me do my math. Yes, that is right.
Okay,
Yep,
so
yep.
now as we're recording this, they're what, 14, 12, and 9? Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. And
You're better
in
at
that
math than
first
I am.
and in that first episode of the Dungeon Minister, you had talked about how the game came to be. They wanted to know what you did when you were a teenager, what kind of things that you did to entertain yourself, and they got interested in the game. And you also talked about what characters they play and what character your wife plays. She's also in the game. So so many questions come to mind. I have run some role-playing games for my 3 children as well. They didn't really get into it as much as your boys have. So it lasted for a little while, but not for too long. So let me ask you, when
Yeah.
you mentioned in the first video that uh, that when you run for an audience that young, between 6 and 14, let's say, what kind of goals do you set for players that are that young, and what
Yeah.
kind of parameters do you use to cabin the storytelling in the game?
Well, in terms of goals, have fun, right? And I will say that you when you're going to go through the the bother of playing a role playing game, and you've got a set of rules that you're using, and there's all these established tropes of the magic user and the thief and the etc. You're going to have that fun within a framework. Just like if you're going to play baseball, you're not going to play baseball by playing football, right? So you are within a structure, but ultimately the structure is there to serve the game, the fun. And if so you can't be too fussy, I think, about dotting all the i's and crossing all the t's when you're playing with kids. And I occasionally I'll get a comment from somebody who's like, well, actually, magic user at that level could not cast that spell on a Tuesday when it was raining, and I'm like, well, you know what? It's a game. It's fun. It's supposed to be fun. So the first thing is to not be too caught up. Like I get having fun with the game in a real granular way. I want to hear about the vector of the arrow that I shot, and what impact point will it have, and where on the body is the wound, and all. And I get that can be a different version of fun, and it could be a really absorbing way to play the game. Hey, he's back. But I'd venture to say that with kids, generally speaking, you're going to be skipping along the surface a little more. That's one thing. But the goal is to have fun, and so that would be sort of the means, and some of the parameters around it. You got to be careful with your themes, right? Because you are talking about, especially when they were younger. Now it's a little better. Why, you gotta be aware of who you're playing with, and It's not the level of rules, because they'll get the rules. They'll understand the rules. They're smart as whips. But sometimes you just want to make sure that the theme is appropriate, that you're not doing something that's just not suitable. If you wouldn't want them reading the novel version, don't play the game version, right? So that's about it. And then use dice trays or dice towers, because otherwise the dice will be all over the floor.
That's right. Yeah, that happens even with adult players.
True, true.
Mike and Jonathan, I'm going to popcorn over to you fellas. Go ahead, and what would you like to know?
So I will admit, I will freely admit, I don't know about JB. I know Rob has run for his kids. My kids were not into it, when they were younger. So I never did. Last time I ran for children, I was one. Um, so, but
We all
one thing
still
is,
are. We all still are.
yeah, I may grow old, I won't grow up, that kind of thing. That's always a good thing. But and I have started watching your videos, Father Aaron. I think I'm up to the Yeti episode, is where I am so
Yes.
far.
Old
And
times.
it is very interesting to me. I'm enjoying watching them. I will say that. Uh, you have mentioned, and we have talked about this before. We have talked about fudging dice rolls for better story and things of
Mhm.
that nature. And you have mentioned something
Right.
similar to not do too much trauma to your children, at least early on.
Well,
When they
and
were.
and it's particular, especially to the situation of three brothers, right?
Yes.
So I run a parish game, and in this parish game, we've had character deaths. In fact, one kid has lost 5 or 6 characters now. 7, I'm informed by Fleetwood, um, because he sees a dangerous situation and he runs into it. He doesn't care how many hit points he has, what his AC is at. He's just going to go for it. Um, and in that setting, everyone laughs and it's funny and we go on. I think the kid's getting a little tired of the characters dying, and he's hopefully learning.
He's managed to survive one session.
Okay, so he's survived a session. I'm getting side edits from Fleetwood here, who's actually running the game now. I started it and he took over the DMing of it, but it's easier there. I don't know how many of you have siblings. I was an only child, so this is all new to me. That things that their friends say or do and that they would laugh about, when their brothers do, it is a cause for war. And so, in terms of playing with siblings, and every group is different. Every set of siblings is going to be different. But I had the distinct feeling that if one of their characters died in an early adventure, it was not going to go down well, right? Because it was a sibling situation. Now I have since ceased doing that. I've ceased um, uh, giving plot armor to the characters. But coupled with that is they're now more seasoned role players, so they don't do the dumb stuff. They don't do the crazy stuff. They don't run in to a dark room, where there's mysterious sounds when they're down to 2 hit points. They don't do that. So they've learned how to role play. They've learned how to be tactical. They've learned how to be strategic. So I feel now that'd be giving them an unfair advantage. So now I'm brutal with the dice, but they're seasoned enough. They know when to retreat. They know when they're overmatched, and so they don't tend to get into that kind of trouble. But yeah, there was it was, I would say, when it comes to young kids, it's not always the case, as our parish game proves. But there are times when you just need to read the room, like anything. You read the room and you say, "This isn't the place for it." Right? Plus,
Sure.
they were all brand new to role playing.
And that, I
there are
think
times.
that's wonderful, because the reason I was going to ask that is one of the things that we learned as childhood. It taught us how to lose, which I think is a very important lesson,
Yeah.
um, early on, and that's why I was going to ask that question. But thank you very much. You covered it very well.
And I will say, sometimes I watch the recaps of the Heroes of Honeywood episodes, and I marvel. It's like sometimes they come very very close to, and yet the rolls are always with them, and I'm like, holy cow, like that's amazing.
Well, they're they're not always. What it tends to be is, and I don't. I mean, when I narrate, I'm not giving every blow by blow. Some battles more so than others. And sometimes what it amounts to is this character's down to single digits. He's dropping back, right? He's not going to be in the front line anymore. He's going to pull back and start throwing arrows in. So and that's what I mean by they've learned how to do it. They've learned, okay, my character needs to, with the possible exception of Touchberry, who the weaker he gets, the braver he gets for some reason. But no, well, this last one we'd trap got set and full fire missed the save. Took 2 darts, took a lot of damage. Those things happen. But they've gotten better at.
For sure. All right, Jonathan.
Well, I'd be interested. Now, first, I should say I don't have kids, and the only time I can remember actually running for kids is I actually ran for your kids when you were briefly trying to get your 2 daughters and son to role play a little bit. I ran something, and it was years ago because I remember your son was very young, I think, when we ran this. But we ran something fairly impromptu though, and it wasn't anything that had been set up very carefully beforehand. But I remember them enjoying it at least. But we didn't do it again though. I think my question though was, have you ever had problems with, or what changes do you make with the themes of the games that you're running, and how careful are you with that?
Right. Well, so because it's all homebrew, I don't use modules or anything. I never have to adapt anything. It's as I write. And we've been pretty clear from the start that bad guys are bad, right? That orcs are monsters, goblins are monsters, right? Now they have recently, because of how inherently weak the monster is, they found kobolds more funny than threatening. They when there was a recent incident, I don't think it hasn't been recounted yet, but it's a repeat of something that's happened before, because I rolled a random encounter when they were at a spot on the map where they've had a random encounter before with kobolds, and the kobolds had set up a blockade and were demanding money to pass on the road, and the characters just paid them because they've got gold coming out of their ears now, because there's in Beckme you get gold like crazy, and so it's not going to hurt them at all to pay it, and it's for them it's just not even worth killing the kobolds. Actually, it turns out it's probably a good thing, because this last time they were all pretty low in hit points. It might actually have been a challenge. They didn't have any spells left. But I can't remember what question I'm answering now. Oh, yes, the themes. So in terms of writing it, I'm not writing in... if I write in a battle scene, and the kids are in the room with me now. If I write in a battle scene, I'm not writing in what would have historically been some of the consequences of that battle after the village is taken. I shy away from a lot in terms of gore, right? And and there's been a process as I've played to be in the middle of a game and to notice that one of them is looking upset about the direction things are going in, and so okay, pull back from that a little bit, de-emphasize perhaps the horror of the situation, head in a slightly different direction, narratively, not in terms of what monsters they're facing, but just in terms of description and things like that.
Okay. So I'm interested, Father. For those viewers who are watching this because they are interested in learning how to run an RPG for younger players, not all of them will necessarily be running for their own children. You are in that
Right.
distinct subcategory, and as was I. So in that particular situation, How do you balance being both the dungeon master and the dad when you're around the table?
Well, you know what? Actually, when it comes down to it, that the answer to that question is embodied in the answers to the previous questions. Because I know my kids and I know them as well as anyone. Um, not only can I anticipate where there may be issues, I can also read where they're, what's going on at the table. So that helps. But that ultimately, though, is true of any DM running any game for any age group, right? You are running this game for and with these individuals, and so if you are doing a game shop game, and this is the first time you've ever met them, and you're at a convention and you've never met these people before, you're going to just have to take it on trust that they'll come with you. But even as you go through the game, I've had the experience of running for people who are new and saying, okay, this person is withdrawing. I don't think enough has been asked of them. Their character hasn't been given much to do. And so in the next random encounter, they're going to get attacked first, right? So that they're center stage. Or they're going to, I'll it'll just be something that ends up being DM choice. I'll move it in their direction because I notice that someone's withdrawing. They're not having as much interaction. And that's what DMs do all the time, right? So, but it is knowing that you will end up living with the consequences of the game too. Well, one of the things in the early days when we first started playing, and I did not anticipate it catching on as much as it did. I don't know why. I mean, I was an 11-year-old boy when I first picked it up. Yeah, I could. Yeah, of course. But the consequence that we ended up living with is every day. Can we play D&D today? Can we play D&D today? Can we play D&D today? To the point where we had to put it on the calendar. This is when we'll play. Leave us alone the other 6 days. I have to write the thing first, right? Yeah. So it's the dad part is, as I say, it's part in the earlier 2 questions. It's knowing them, understanding how this is going to be impacting not only them as an individual, but the group dynamic. Because they're together 24/7. We homeschool, so they're not even heading off to school, right? They're together 24/7, pretty much.
Yeah.
So understanding that balance and being sensitive to it.
Thank you.
So again, I told you I'm early on in your videos that I've been watching. Um, the way that you emote and the things that you bring to your summaries are very interesting. And the one that has stuck with me so far the most, I will be honest, um, was your pleasant and pleased surprise at your sons leaving the family of ogres, the ogre children alone.
Yes. Yeah, they
Um,
left the children alone.
they left the children alone. So I'm curious, and again, I'm going to watch them all, so you don't have to worry about spoiling because I'm going to watch them. Um, can you bring to your mind what the most surprising decision your boys have made as a part of their adventures is to date?
Gee. Um, you'll probably find it watching it. You'll just watching me. I have a terrible memory, which my boys will tell you. Um, head shaking on this end of the camera. There have been things they've chosen to do, paths they went off on that I couldn't have anticipated. They decided in the middle of a brewing civil war in the kingdom, they decided to go north to keep a date with a giant. I mean, they had their reasons for it. I'm not saying there was no reason for it, but it surprised me. That I did not expect. Um, they'll do things and they'll do things in the moment. For instance, Touchberry being down to single digits, and instead of backing off and switching to bow, he charges. Um, that kind of stuff has shocked me. Um, yeah, they do all sorts of stuff. during the game where I go, oh, didn't see that coming. Okay. I can't think of one that was like the signal. This was the real landmark thing that absolutely shocked me. As I say, if you watch them, you'll probably find an example. You say that's probably the one that would fit the bill. This is not me telling your viewers to go watch all my videos, by the way.
It would have been a good plug, you know. So,
Yeah, you'll have to watch them all to find out.
I have to admit I've never watched them, and I intend to now. But I wanted to ask you how it all really started. I mean, who came to who first about playing the game? Did you go to them first, or did one of them say, "Hey, Dad, you know, this really seems interesting. Can you teach us how to do it?" What how did it occur really to begin?
I was doing bedtime, and they were trying to stay up later, so they would ask me, what did you do when you were my age? What did you play with when you were my age? And then they ran out of their ages and went to other ages, and eventually we got to teenage, and I said, well, I played a lot of D&D. And so I sort of, improvised in the moment. Okay, you're a fighter, you're a thief, you're a magic user, you're walking through the forest and you see a cave ahead of you on the side of a hill. You decide to go in, you light your lantern and lift it up. And, as I described a scenario, and they said, could we play that sometime? I said, sure, I'll write a little adventure, we'll play it, right? So that's how it started. And I thought like we'd play once or twice, that'd be it. But here we are now, it's 3-4 years later. Because I didn't start recording immediately after it was in the spring that we started playing, and I didn't start recording videos till the fall. So you think my memory is bad in the short term, stretch it out to 6 or 7 months.
So naturally, over the 3 years that you've been playing, just as a matter of human development, their problem solving skills and their creativity is just going to develop. There's going to be a baseline. But to what extent do you think, if at all, role playing with them, playing Dungeons and Dragons with them, has affected their problem solving skills and their creativity?
All three of them have begun writing their own games. They do various stages of completion. But I mean, I remember being that age, and I started writing my own game as well. And and it's interesting to notice them doing the same things that I did. Starting with the monsters instead of with the mechanic, the base mechanic of the game. Yeah, starting with the fun stuff instead of with the hard, gritty math stuff. But they've all done that, and they've not only written those kinds of games, they've branched out. Both Bob Johnny and Fleetwood have written sort of war game things. Bob Johnny using these wooden shapes that we had from when they were little to teach them shapes and geometry and stuff, and Fleetwood just using miniatures. He's written his own kind of D6 war game, and Touchberry has written. He started on a series of novels, and he's got plans for I don't know, was it 7 or 10 or something like that? Like high 20s. He's got a whole it's Fred Saberhagen sort of level of complete world building going on in his head. And again, you remember being a kid, and you've got the dreams are up here, and the actual realization somewhere beneath it, but just the expansive imagination to go do that. Now, I don't know how much of that is role playing. They also started a newspaper a few years ago and delivered it to the neighborhood for a few months. Half a year is a few months.
No, 6 months.
Okay, let me do my interview. That's the other thing about being a DM dad, is that there's constantly a running stream of editorial. Yeah, but to play some of the games, because they also DM for each other and for me, and to play some of the games that they write, and to ask, well, where did you get that idea? Like, I'm thinking they've seen it in a movie or read it in a book, and it's just, oh, I just thought of it. Really, you know, um, it's impressive. So I don't know how much to chalk up to role playing and how much is just innately being a kid, but it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
So, and I'm curious because you had mentioned you're running a parish game as well.
Mhm.
So is it just the kids, or do some of the parents get involved from the parish? And the reason I ask is one of your first videos, you talked about the Satanic Panic, which I believe most of us lived through back in the day. Um, it didn't hit so hard, I think, where we were on the East Coast. There were stories here and there about it, but I'm curious because probably a lot of parents of the kids, if they're the similar age of your kids, they may have been through the same similar thing, and I'm wondering how they have taken to the parish game or things of that nature.
There are a couple of parents who play. So there's parishioners' kids, and then there's another priest plays uh, and children. Um, and like one of the parishioners, I mean, he was a big old nerd from back in the day, so he used to play when he was a kid. The other priest, totally new experience. Um, but it's none of them have any sort of lingering. There's no lingering satanic panic going on. I do have a parishioner who had been in the Roman Catholic Church, and their parish priest told her son that he could not start a D&D club at their school because the Roman Catholic schools and the parishes are very linked. And because at the time he was convinced that it was satanic, and she left that church. And so now she's with us, and she's delightful. So their loss. But so any reaction I've had has been positive, and people are actually when I explain to them that the Dungeon Minister channel has opened a way for people who have no church affiliation to interact with a priest, right? And to do so in a positive way, because I legitimately love the same. We share the same hobby. I legitimately, I'm not like hello fellow teenagers. Like I actually love this game and have been playing it since I was a kid, with a decent break in my 20s and 30s. But it's opened up conversations with people. The parish is extremely supportive. They think it's great. Like go. And then when I run a game at the local game shop, although it's been a while there, we changed venues for a number of reasons. But to be there and to be approached by people, say, can I talk to you? And when your game's wrapping up, can I talk to you? No, it's been largely positive. The the only sort of odd quirk that happened is when we first started again, and this was at the height of lockdowns. So the local game shop was locked down, and you'd go online and you'd order something, you'd pay for it online, and then you'd go and you'd ring a doorbell, and a hand would come out of the door and set it on a stool, and um, I ordered some dice because I had one set, and I didn't. It was easier if they had at least one set that they could share between the three of them. Again, I thought we'd play one or two games. Um, I went to pick them up, and they're sitting inside. I could see the two people inside sitting at the counter, and I ring the bell, and they look at me. And I'm dressed like this. I'm always dressed like this. They look at me, and they go right back to what they were doing. I ring it again, and they'll look at me like this guy's got the wrong place. He's at the wrong. But eventually, they did come and give me my dice. But other than that, there really hasn't been a lot of negative
That's
reaction
hilarious. JB?
or
Oh,
like
I'm sorry.
lingering problems. No.
Do um, do you ever have? And you mentioned this that somebody kind of approached you after the game in your role as a priest. Do you ever have any issues or ways that you've handled um, kind of overlapping responsibilities? I mean, being a priest or being the GM. Is there ever any reticence because you're one of the priests, or to play the character a certain way because they feel like maybe it's not going to be appropriate? Or, I mean, do you ever have that?
None that has evidenced itself to me at all. Judging by the behavior both of the kids in the parish game and by some of my players in the game shop game, if this is them reining it in for the priest, good heavens. No. The one thing I would say, the one place where the Venn diagram does actually really kick in is in table management, because there are times when, if I wasn't a priest, I'd take a player aside and say, I think you should find another table. Right. But and I can imagine situations in which that would happen anyway, even being the priest. But one of the roles of the church is to go to the lost and the outcast. And I mean, come on, guys, our hobby is nothing but the lost and outcast, right? We were not picked first for kickball, right? We had the hardest time in the school getting the date for prom, and so it behoves me as a priest to be more patient than I, as a person, might normally be, with players who are they don't fit the group, and so I work harder to make sure the group will accommodate, and I try to. Sometimes it's beyond my control because the other players have decided, right, and they but I try to be more community building than I might be otherwise as a DM. Which I think is the role of a DM anyway. It's one of the roles, not the role of a DM, but it's one of the roles of a DM, is to keep the table going, right? Keep everyone jiving together. But I feel it more urgently, perhaps, because of the collar.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I think it's a little easier when your players are just your peers, and they're folks that you know well. But when you're bringing in the larger community, that presents its own challenges. I've had similar experiences running at cons where you don't know folks, and the convention is expecting you to run this game in this time slot, so you've got to pull things together. It's not exactly the same as what you're talking about, but I see where you're going.
It's
So
similar.
yeah, it's a little bit. It's a little similar. So bringing it back to having younger players at the table, let's talk about some of the challenges that presents. So, aside from having to you tailor your storytelling toward a younger audience, are there any
Yeah.
unique challenges that the youthful player himself presents, and how do you deal with those challenges?
So, an incapacity to control energy. This particularly at the parish game, because we play it in the afternoon, so it's after school. They're all they've all been behaving, presumably, to some extent, for the day, and now it's uncorked, and they're describing doing adventurous things, right? Fighting beasts and climbing mountains and all this kind of stuff, going into caves. So they're describing themselves doing adventurous things. And for the most part, a 12-year-old boy has a real challenge keeping it all in their head and not letting it come out in their body. So they're leaping around the room like gazelles and charging back and forth like rhinoceroses, right? It's a little crazy. That's one, and that's one aspect. Is the just the energy, and then the room goes, right. Like one of them goes off, and the table's gone for about 3 minutes until you rein everyone back in. We hardly get any adventure played in like the 2-3 hours that we play. It's a game of inches. The other thing is just focus. When for the really little ones, like when we started, and we did have a 6-year-old and whatnot. Getting the focus there, which is part of the reason I started doing terrain. When I played back in the day, I never did. I don't know if crafting your own terrain was even a thing in the 80s. I don't know. I didn't do it. We didn't even lay out a piece of paper with with drawing rooms on it. We didn't do any of that. It was all theater of the mind. I had miniatures. I had so many miniatures that sat on my dresser in my bedroom and were never used in the game. I didn't even bring them out to say, like this is the monster you're fighting. I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't. But I found, especially with my youngest, that keeping the attention on the narrative and keeping it from straying into the silly. Like I said at the beginning, if you're playing this game, you're playing within a structure and trying to keep us in the structure. A lot of freedom within the structure, but to keep within that. The minis and the terrain really helped. Once there was a thing on the table, because then there goes the focus right there. That's going to hold him, right? Now, I found that there are pitfalls there as they went out and bought their own minis. And for a while, Bob Johnny's favorite thing at every game was to say, and then a water elemental comes in, and he'd put his big water elemental on the table. And then a black dragon comes in. It's like, no, they don't. Get your minis off the table. But again, that's part of the being dad as well.
So just one more question for me because you've so you have, I guess, from the difference between your oldest and youngest is about 6 years.
Yeah, 5, 6. It depends on when in the year you're talking to me, but yeah.
Yeah, 5, 6 years. So now Robert knows this. I know JB does not. I have one brother who is 8 years younger than I am, and it was a challenge when we were of an age to play while he was running around.
Right.
So the curiosity I have in knowing that you're also running a parish game, probably with widely varied ages of children, is what challenges do you find where you have, like you said, the 6-year-old and then the burgeoning teenager, and keeping them both in the same themes and interests?
Well, actually, the parish game is a bit more homogenous because, as I mentioned it briefly, Fleetwood, who's the 14-year-old, he has taken over DMing that group. So he's moved from player to behind the screen. So it changes the dynamic. And the other kids, he would be the oldest one in the room. So the other kids are now on a more even plane. The range is less. It goes basically from 9 to 12. So the bigger range is actually in our family. But I have found there was one session where a teenager from another parish came in and he played one session. And he was speaking a different language. I mean, nearly literally. I don't know what kids are saying anymore. Talking about drippy ice, and I don't know what that even. But it isn't actually ice that's melting. From what I understand, it was whenever they found any gems. But and the younger kids, the 9-year-olds, started to gravitate to him and try to impress him. So it wasn't so much trying to keep them together. It was actually trying to you be you. You're fine as a 9-year-old. Be a 9. Don't try to be him, But I find that with this game, because it's a game of imagination, everyone's got one. And although they're going to play in different ways, the 9-year-old will have different thematic or emotional goals in mind when imagining. They're still both engaged in the work of imagining and telling a story, right? They do it in different ways. And it's really kind of up to the players, in a sense, but the DM can stick handle a bit of this, because when the 9-year-old makes a suggestion that would sound foolish to the 14 or 15-year-old, you stick handle it into something that fits in the game. And when the 15-year-old is talking about drippy ice, you know, you can corral him back in, because they're old enough to say, but what about what's happening here? Right? You know, what about what's happening now? Um, it takes sort of massaging, and it's not the easiest thing. It is easier when you've got. I DM'd at last year's convention. I did the opening game, and it was a delight. These are like old school, serious role players who know what they're about, and they were fabulous, right? Like, they made interesting choices. They played roles. They didn't just roll dice. It was great, right? Um, it's not going to be like that with a bunch of kids with varied ages. Okay, and not that they won't role play; they will eventually. But they're going to do it in a different way. And when you do have the variation, it does take more table management. But the swift answer is, how do you keep them? The swift answer is gently, gently but firmly, if at all possible.
Thank you.
I don't know if you're picking up. I don't do short answers. It's one of my great weaknesses.
That's what makes you a great interviewee. Jonathan, you want to take it? You want to
No,
take
Paul, I was actually going to ask the same thing about the age ranges. Do you find though that this is uh, major? Because I know that when I was very young, one of my first role playing experiences was, even though it turned me on to role playing, the person who was running wasn't really very accepting of a younger person role playing,
Right.
and not so much the GM to the player, but player to player. Do you find that your sons are more accommodating to somebody who's a little different, or is it teaching them to be that way, to be a little more including of other people?
Well, one of the one of the real benefits of homeschooling is that they spend their day with a spectrum of ages. From the youngest kid up to my wife, who does most of the teaching. So, and they have to relate to each other, and to watch the 14-year-old and the 9-year-old play together is really something quite special, because it's different than the 12-year-old and the 9-year-old playing together. It's different than the 12-year-old and the 14-year-old playing together. There's a different dynamic at play in all of those combinations. Um, I would say that because they've only, well, not only, they've done other things since, but because their foundation was in playing as the three of them with different age levels, they're pretty okay with people at different places and different levels of entering the game, and pretty welcoming of whatever age. But yeah, you do see a certain, but you see that among adults too, right? Um, there's the role player that wants to spend about half of the game time talking about the other games that he's played, or the movies that he's seen, or what he had for lunch. And then there's the one who's really into the tactics and really wants to focus on that. And they do not agree at all on how to play this game, And there's tension in that situation too. So um, I think the more practice you have at it, certainly, the more often you make yourself knuckle down and say, this person's in the game as well, the better you end up getting at it. And it's because they've been playing at a range of ages from the beginning. Um, they're pretty good at it by now. They're pretty good at it.
That's
Actually,
great.
the one that's hardest to integrate into the game, the ones that are hardest to integrate into the game are the parents who play. My wife, God bless, she pretty much knits. She'll roll her dice. She'll contribute to the story. She'll especially when they get stuck. She lets them do most of the deciding and directing and stuff. But if they get stuck on a puzzle or something, every once in a while I'll shoot her a look, and she'll let's move along. We've been here for an hour and a half trying to solve this puzzle. Let's go. Let's go.
I think that's good.
That also, although sometimes though they're right and she doesn't have any idea what's going on, so it goes all over the place.
Yeah, there you go. Well, thank you so much for giving us this perspective, Father Aaron. And I would like to close with letting you talk about Clericon. So, with our last few minutes, could you explain to the audience what Clericon is, how it came about, and when the next one is, how often it's going to recur, and so forth?
Clericon came about last year. It was the first one was last year, and it was actually a response to a friend of mine, Bill Sylvie, the Dungeon Delver. He's got a channel where he kind of just hangs out every weeknight. And they do all sorts of different stuff over there, but he was having an online convention, and he said, of course, the logistics of an in-person convention is just too much. And I thought, it wouldn't be for me because I'm a priest at a parish where there's a parish hall. And I can rent that for a lot cheaper than I could rent any other venue, right? Because you get a discount. You're the priest, right? Actually, all the parishioners would get discounts. So I rented it for, So I said, I'm going to do that. And I sort of asked myself the question, why wouldn't I? And I couldn't come up with a decent answer. So I went ahead and did it. And we held Clericon. People in a live chat chose the name. In last year in 2023, it was early November. This year, it is the 25th through the 27th of October. And it's held at our parish church in Glen Williams, Ontario. And so if you could find that on a map, then you really have some pretty sharp cartographic skills. It's near Toronto, kind of. Yeah, and it's a lot of fun. We've got a whole bunch of tables going. We've got some really, really cool people running games. Mage's Musings, who is a channel out there. Bandit's Keep, Tale of the Manticore, Hexed Press. Ye Old Geek is coming over from England. I can't believe someone's flying from England to come to this tiny little convention. Bear, the Gen X GM, is running a game. All sorts of folks playing, running games, and it's 3 days, and it's a lot of fun. It was a blast last time, and looking forward to it this time too. And if you wanted to register, you can go to Clericon.com, and Clericon is spelled exactly as you would imagine. Clericon.com.
Yeah, there's only one C in the middle, though, right?
Yep. Like cleric on. Like I have to put my cleric on.
Yeah,
It's your Clericon at Clericon.
It's my intention to come 1 year. I don't know that I'll be able to make it this year, but I am definitely going to make it eventually. So, well, Father Aaron,
Rob, you can get your road trip up there.
And I would walk 500 miles, and I would walk 500 more.
Well, it was really a pleasure to meet you, Father Aaron. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
And
Thanks for having me.
Anytime. It was a pleasure to have you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, really. If you ever want to
Thanks for
come
having
back, you're always welcome. Okay.
Cool.
So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching, and we'll bring you props and ambiance next time. So, thanks very much, and we'll see you next time on the Grognards of Gaming.